Welcome back to Beyond HR, where we go beyond the policies and explore how AI is reshaping the real work of HR. I'm Shveta Malhan.
Hi, and I'm Jeff Wellstead. And today's episode, we're tackling one of the most high stakes areas in HR, which is interviewing and the recruitment process. Because let's face it, most interviews are still run on instinct and gut feel.
That's right. But with AI, now we have the tools that help us move from inconsistent, biased interviews to ones that are structured, fair, and far more predictive of success. Today, Jeff and I will show you how AI can help you generate behavioral questions, build consistent scorecards, and even summarize candidate feedback.
Yeah, and if you're ever wondering how much a bad hire actually costs your business, stick around because we're going to unpack not just the tech, but also the real business impact of getting a hire right.
So, Jeff, before we dive into our demo, I really want to unpack your experience. Why do you think interviews have been so hard to get right, even with all the tools that HR has today?
Well, I've worked with hiring teams at scale, and some of the common gaps are typically a mismatch between what the hiring manager ultimately wants and ultimately what comes through in terms of any kind of a description. The recruiter not necessarily understanding or knowing exactly what the fit is that needs to take place. But I think the worst and most difficult aspect of it is our own cognitive biases, in which we are setting ourselves up for that contact with the other human being and how it is our brains start to process that relationship, even before we actually get to decision making mode. So I think that's what we really want to work on.
That is spot on. And I think also in addition to that a very big gap is also lack of consistency. And from my lived experiences, conducting interviews has been a very unstructured process. Sometimes every candidate gets a different interview, the questions change, the topics wander, and at the end of the day, we are not comparing apples to apples. We are comparing one conversation that we happen to enjoy more than the other. And most likely that is because there's no standardized playbook. And sometimes we don't train our managers to conduct interviews effectively either. In fact, I was looking at some research reports, and one survey found that a shocking 30% of talent leaders admit that their companies offer zero interviewing training. And we throw managers into one of the most critical business decisions that they make without almost no preparation.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And it's crazy to think about it from this perspective because there's possibly no more important a process to get right and to think through and to prepare for and to be very, very exacting, if at all possible, in the interview and selection process than the hiring of a new person into your organization. The costs of that can be so detrimental, not just from a physical cost perspective, which of course can very, very quickly, kind of get up into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if you're not careful, with good people leaving your organization after you've just spent all this time, effort, and money trying to get them on board. But it's the damage that the broken process does to every individual who's involved with it, especially the people who just spent all of their time trying to get to know this person, trying to get them up to speed, trying to get them productive. That's where it really starts to hurt.
Mhm. Jeff, you spoke a little bit about biases in the interview process. Can you tell us more about what kind of biases do in an interview process trickle in naturally, making the interview process ineffective?
Yeah, I definitely can do. I did a bunch of studying on this actually a while back and was really amazed at the human physiology, the neurology and psychology that affects our judgment in terms of our ability to kind of understand why people are the way they are, how people are going to behave 6 months from now, whether or not they're a good fit from a cultural perspective, but also from a technical perspective, from a professional perspective. There are a lot of dimensions to kind of unpack. And bias, cognitive bias, which is basically the sort of predetermined filters that exist in our brain, which often drive our subconscious activities, are alive and present at all times. And there is not a human being on this earth that can probably contest that they haven't kind of had an issue with bias at some point in their decision making processes. In fact, for most of us, our biases follow us around day in and day out, minute by minute, and frankly are very helpful in terms of in terms of
Mhm.
helping us manage our environments and kind of understand how those things work. But here are a couple of them that you might recognize. So one is called an affinity bias, which is that notion that we tend to gravitate toward people who are like us, people who went to the same school or grew up near the same town you did, who know the same people. That's a very, very natural bias. Confirmation bias, super powerful and very, very prevalent, which is where you make a snap judgment that's sort of in the first 10 seconds and spend sort of the rest of your interview basically trying to prove that your initial impressions were correct. Um, I don't quite know how that works, but I guess basically it's your brain probably trying to save energy and stay focused on things. And so making a snap judgment and then basically confirming that judgment makes sense. Um, the halo and the horn effects, where one great or terrible thing about the candidate just really sticks out and basically starts to poison your understanding and your cognition, if you will, of that individual, and or radically improves it, in some particular way, like coming from a particularly prestigious university, or having won a particular award, or achieved a certain level, a degree level, or a certain job level at a famous company, prior to coming to you. So halo and horn effects are quite big. Um, there's all sorts. There's the um, anchoring bias, which is an interesting one, which is that it's that first piece of information that you get about a person, which is often what people lead with when they're trying to get you to interview somebody, which is you've got to speak to this person. They went to MIT and Harvard, and probably are the smartest people I think, one of the smartest people I think I've ever met. Bam. Okay, I'm anchored, right? And so that potentially, if I'm not aware of the bias, might cloud my judgment. And there's a whole pile of them hereafter. I'm not going to kind of waste our time going through it, but you can kind of see that very quickly we find ourselves in a frame of mind that is vulnerable to making poor judgment.
And I think this is where AI can be a real powerful tool where we are delegating certain tasks to AI. I mean, it's not fully making the decisions and choices, but it can be our co pilot to help us reduce some of those biases where we have a structured experience, we have the same set of questions that we are asking all candidates. There's a rubric for evaluating responses. With AI in the mix, it helps us shift from subjective measures like likability or cultural fit to more objective evaluation, and we can get into whether the candidate has the skills to do the job. So let's get into a demo and see if AI can be an effective co-pilot for us in this situation. So I have a few prompts that I want to demo and showcase. So maybe then, Jeff, you play the hiring manager hat here,
Sure.
and let's play out a scenario where you've got approval for hiring a senior product manager. Where would you like us to start engaging with AI in the process?
Well, typical of so many organizations, the question that would come back to me once I went into the recruiters or to the head of HR, whatever the case, to get this rolling, would be, do you have a job description? Excuse me. And of course, my answer would be, I've had job descriptions, but I think the last one I wrote was 5 years ago. I'm pretty sure the job has moved on since. So my answer is probably not. I apologize, but I guess that would be a good starting point. I'm really busy. I don't have lots of time. Happy to contribute to this, but could you just go ahead and put a job description together for me?
Sounds good. So let's start there. Here's a very simple prompt that I had written out previous to our demo to save time. Let's see what output we get. So my prompt here is create me a job description for a senior product manager growth role in a material sciences company. So I'm giving it a little bit context. One, what role I'm looking the job description for and in which organization. And let's see whether the output it gives us is close to what I would have spent time writing out manually.
And you're using ChatGPT 4.0 for this, is that right?
That's correct. I mean, of course, we can, uh, I mean, this conversation, we are not exploring the difference in outputs from different models, but I would assume that whether you use ChatGPT 4.0 or Gemini 2.5 Pro, it will get us closer to the final output that we were looking for. Again, we are not aiming for perfection. We are aiming for, is it helping me save time and be more effective in my job as a hiring manager?
Indeed. Yeah, job descriptions were the one thing when I had to write them from scratch that honestly would make my forehead bleed, because it was just like, oh God, where do I start? And I remember when Google, was like the primary search engine. The first thing you would do is go search like 100 different job descriptions and then try to knit something together, right?
That's
This is
right.
amazing how
Yeah.
how it just gets you rolling. Yeah,
So it's based on the simple prompt. It has made certain assumptions and given us a little bit brief about the organization. Here, because we are playing with a fictitious scenario, we just went very lean in our prompt. But if it was a real organization that I'm working in and I'm putting the prompt, I can tell them about the company and a little bit more detail about the organization that I am working on.
indeed.
It's made certain assumptions about the role as well and the key responsibilities, qualifications. So it's given me a really good starting point. And if I have to modify something, I can always go in as a hiring manager and work with this starting point and fine tune and refine it.
Yeah, and to your point, once we actually get a process rolling in your company, the context stuff will really make this process so much more, laser specific. And you just start to build on it. You start to tell it, what reporting relationship it is, what the job is going to require or involve. And it's amazing how, ChatGPT or other models could just pick up on that and really start to make sense of it and just organize your thinking very, very quickly.
Yeah. So from here, let's move into, now that we have the job description, the next step for the hiring manager be around the interview guide or the interview questions. And that's where biases start creeping in. So I again have a pre-populated prompt that I'm going to use here, which is, um, as you see on the screen, we are giving this the thread a role. We want it to be an expert. So if you look at the prompt, it has 4 sections. Let me walk you through the 4 sections of the prompt so that we understand why the depth of the prompt helps us get closer to the output that we are looking for. So first of all, we've assigned it a persona. We've asked ChatGPT to wear the IO psychologist hat. Um, because it helps AI understand the role that it needs to play. We are not just talking to a generic chatbot in this context. We are telling it to be an IO psychologist or industrial organizational psychologist. And this is the most important step for getting high quality expert level output. Because by assigning a persona, we are telling AI to access specific knowledge, vocabulary, and frameworks associated with that profession. And we know that an IO psychologist has the background and knowledge about creating fair, legally defensible, and predictive interviews. This is far more powerful than asking for just give me the interview questions for this job. It frames the entire request from a place of scientific rigor.
Yeah, and that's really important. It's really interesting because a lot of people are sort of like, what do I have to do? I actually have to tell the large language model what it's meant to be. But in the truth, what you're doing is you're programming it. You're programming it to say, to your point, Shweta, go find this body of knowledge and become instantaneously expert at it. It's like, great, cool. This way I don't have to search the entire universe of information. I can be laser specific about what it is you're looking for. So that's really clever, actually, the IO psychologist idea.
Yeah. And the next part of the prompt is assigning it what we want it to do. So as you can see in the highlighted text, we've given it a clear overarching goal. We are defining the final deliverable that we want a complete structured interview guide. And this tells AI that the finished product should look what the finished product should look like. It's not just a list of questions. It's a comprehensive guide that we are looking for. And this sets the scope and prevents AI from just giving us a short, unhelpful list of questions. It provides AI clear directions in terms of what we want it to achieve for us.
Indeed. Yeah, that's kind of like what I always refer to as the brief, right? Which is the more specific you can be about the brief, the more specific it can be about your responses and answers. So, yeah, super, super important. And you got
Yep.
some good stuff in there too. So this is clearly written
Yep.
from the experience of an educated HR person. So you said based on the job description below, right? So you identify 5 to 7 critical competencies for this role. That's critical. That's awesome because then
Yep.
that gives you a basis to interview against. For each competency, generate 2 to 3 behavioral interview questions
Yep.
designed to be answered using the STAR method. Perfect, which is situation, task, action, result. Wow, this is going to be powerful. And then create a simple 5 point rating scale, one being poor, five being excellent, where the brief descriptions for what poor and good and excellent look like um, are one of the key competencies. Interesting. Yeah, gosh, that's really good. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah. And again, here we are putting constraints and giving it more instructions, giving AI more instructions so that, I mean, in a way, we are putting guardrails for AI so that it just doesn't wander off and give us something that is not relevant to what we want it to achieve through the output that it generates for us.
And
So
this, and you
basically,
can
we're
save these
controlling the
prompts.
quality.
Yeah, you can save these prompts, right, too, over, I guess, with ChatGPT and kind of like just capture it and just reuse it over and over again, I would imagine.
Yep, that's right. Um, and then we are asking it to refer to the job description above, which is giving it the context so that whatever it gives us the output, it's linked to the context of the job description, the actual job description. So the AI's output is only as good as the context that we provide. Without the job description, it would generate generic questions for a product manager. But by feeding specific details, we are enabling it to create a guide that's highly tailored and relevant to the specific needs of this job.
Nice. Time to
So
see what.
let's see what output it gives us. Yep. And before I hit enter, I'd also like to say that we can use AI to write this prompt for us too. If we are struggling with the depth and details of the prompt, you can engage with AI to say, hey, I'm looking to build a prompt for AB series, and can you build a prompt for me? And
Yeah,
it'll build the detailed prompt for you.
yeah, that's a very good point. Here we go. Here we go.
So see, it's already pulled out the key competencies from the job description. Now, for
So,
each competency, it's picking behavioral questions to ask that align to the STAR methodology.
wow, this is great. This already is infinitely better than any recruitment process I've ever run in the past.
Yeah. And the beauty about this is that the hiring manager can tailor their own interview guide. At least they build the interview guide from their perspective, and they can use the same set of questions over and over again for all the candidates that we interview, which reduces the bias factor.
Yeah, and when I think about like typically what the recruitment process has been at the tech firms that I've supported, oftentimes, yes, of course, it always ever starts with a recruiter who goes out and does the initial
Yep.
screening, does the attraction, does the initial interview, just double checks on everything, and then puts them in touch with the hiring manager. But the hiring manager may literally have two, possibly three other people that they want these candidates to see. And it can get really confusing and really
Yeah.
difficult to track, how it is we feel about, pardon me,
Yeah.
how it is we feel about each of the candidates as they're coming through the process. If in fact we don't have a list of questions that we're going to determine and ask, just good science. If you ask
Yeah.
everybody the same questions, then you can judge basically what the output of those folks are relative to one another, as opposed to just going completely off script every time you sit down in front of somebody, letting your cognitive biases run wild, right? And then basically having a conversation with somebody, and at the end of it, kind of deciding off the cuff, do I or do I not like this person?
Hmm.
Not clever, not scientific, not a good way to kind of to kind of run a process. So
Yeah.
that's super super useful. And the other thing you could do too with that, because you asked for how many different sets of behavioral interviewing questions based on the competencies, so like
I,
five or
I think we said 2 to 3.
2 to 3. Okay, got 2 to 3 questions per, but you had a total of seven groupings of
Yeah.
competencies.
So
So
five
that's
to
super useful.
seven
Yeah,
critical competencies and 2 to 3 questions per competency.
yeah, and that's super important too, because maybe you want to split it up, amongst the three other interviewers and say you cover questions 1 through 3, then you do 4 through, 6, whatever it is. Or when you're kind of passing somebody from a candidate from one interviewer to another, maybe you want to get further clarity because you didn't have enough time to, via the star process and so forth, and ask that interviewer, hey, go back to question number 7, drill down on that for me. I'm really interested in seeing what it is you think based on their response. Suddenly it's like you really are like a proper laboratory, kind of using the scientific method to kind of triangulate as to like who in fact is going to be the best person for this role. And
Yeah.
always again being conscious and aware of the fact that your biases may always ever be in play.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, like the output we get, we don't have to stick to the first output that we get from ChatGPT. If we feel like we want to ask a specific question, we can always add, edit, modify the starting point that AI is giving us. But just imagine this work took us like 2 minutes. Imagine doing it from scratch manually. This might have been half a day worth of time that a hiring manager would have had to put it.
Spot on. Even spelling out the criteria for what poor is versus what excellent is,
Yeah.
very relevant and intelligent, kind of descriptors behind each one of those. So I kind of understand, like if somebody is being vague or indirect, that's not good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to demo a situation where we got these set of questions, but as a hiring manager, I feel like I want to pepper in one or two on of my own. And this is again where there's a potential for bias to creep in, and we can leverage AI to test our questions, whether or not it has bias and how to remove it. So I created another prompt here where I'm giving it this AI now a different role. I'm saying you are an AI powered HR compliance auditor, and your task is to analyze the following list of questions for potential biases based on EEOC guidelines. So I'm being very specific around and telling this AI agent to wear a specific hat and adhere to certain standards. And then what I'm also telling it is that for each question, identify any potential affinity bias, stereotyping, or questions that are not job related. If a question is problematic, explain why it's a risk and suggest a fairer behavior based alternative using the STAR methodology. And then I list all the questions that I felt like I wanted to add to this list as a hiring manager. So it's
Uh,
giving me real time coaching and correcting me for my personal input that I'm adding as a hiring manager.
you know what I love about this stuff, Shweta, is the fact that it feels to me like you literally have a panel of experts
Yeah.
at your disposal. You know what I mean? Sat in the office with you, ready to answer your every question. And I'm not saying that, ChatGPT or large language models always ever get it right, or perfect.
Yeah.
But wow, does it open up your eyes? I'm dying to see what the result of this is. Click through, man. Here we go.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, and imagine the back and forth reduction of time when a hiring manager and a recruiter have to do back and forth in this documentation reviewing things. And
Crazy.
hiring manager can get instant answers to questions that they have. And to your point, because they have specialists at their fingertips now.
Wow, look at this. So is it saying, so it's giving us those little, I don't know if they're not emojis, but they're little symbols, but it risk
Yeah.
identification. So
Yeah. So the first question that we wanted to add was, where did you go to college or university? So AI is telling us the risks associated with us asking this question, that this question can lead to affinity bias and is not job related, and why. And it's also giving us an alternate that if you really want to go this route, your question should be framed as, tell me more about an academic or training experience that prepared you for the challenges of this role. So it's not just generic question around where did you go to college. It's being more specific to tease out how their education experience is related to the job that they're applying for.
yeah, and that's an extraordinarily good point. I mean, it seems so simple, right? But I mean, I worked for at some point several Wall Street firms like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, where of course this affinity, if you will, and attachment to particular colleges and
Yeah.
universities was huge. And there was always ever the presumption that we only ever, as arrogant as we were back in the day, we only ever talked to the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? This kind of ridiculousness. And never did we think to stop and ask, okay, so what was your academic experience like? What did you really enjoy? What did you hate about your academic experience? What
Yeah.
would you have done different? None of that. It was all, oh, you went to Princeton? You're special. Okay,
Yep.
great. We'll just take it as read that, you can kind of like shoot on through. So
That's right.
it is, yeah, crazy.
And imagine if you and I both went to Princeton and I'm interviewing for a role in your team, immediately you're going to look at me differently against other candidates who probably don't have that affinity of the same university or college.
Unquestionably. And that used to happen all the time. In
Yeah.
fact, oftentimes, to really make things worse, we would send people who actually graduated from particular institutions to that institution to do the interviews. So you talk about how biased they were already and
Yeah.
how excited they were to go back to visit their old alma mater. It's just nuts. I mean, what were we thinking in terms, you know what I mean, in terms of the selection process?
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is real time coaching for hiring managers too, so that they can understand why they should not be asking certain questions, So,
Amazing. And this is huge. This is the kind of stuff that HR would have to publish to everybody and take them through training and everything else.
that's right. And now there's no longer the need to pull a hiring manager into a course on hiring 101 because if they engage with their AI co-pilot effectively, they can get just-in-time coaching and training. So the application of training is much more, quicker, which means the stick rate of learning is going to be higher as well.
Amazing. Love it.
So it's evaluated all the questions for us and it's given us what are the risks associated with each question that we want to add and recommended alternatives as well.
So
Again,
did
it
you
makes
ask
our
for this?
process so much more easier.
Yeah. So did you ask for this kind of formatting, or did ChatGPT just decide this would be a nice little summary for you to have?
I think it just decided that this might be a good way for it to package the information for me. Now, having said that, this output could be because of the way I have been engaging with ChatGPT for last 2 years. Maybe for someone who's new to ChatGPT, they might have to prompt it specifically a couple of times, saying that when you give me a summary, always present to me in a table format. So it will memorize the asks from the user and remember it in all contexts and scenarios. Another challenge that I think hiring managers have is, let's say, for example, for a job, we had 10 candidates who applied and we interviewed 10 candidates. Now, how do we summarize the responses of all the candidates and make sense of who's doing well compared to others in which competency so that we can make a more informed choice and a decision as a hiring manager? So what I did was, and this one is easier because typically in situations where, so there could be two situations where an interview is happening and the hiring manager is taking written notes and putting it in a system so that they have a consolidated list of notes against a rubric that they had created and the set of questions that they asked. The other could be the transcript of the Zoom call or the interview that they had online. So they can extract the transcript for each candidate and throw it in their AI GPT to see how do we make sense of all the responses that we had from the 5 candidates or 10 candidates that we interviewed. So what I'm doing, I created a fictitious data set. And what I'm going to ask ChatGPT now is give it a different role that you are a talent. Oh, one second. You are an AI talent acquisition co-pilot designed to help the hiring manager make objective, data-driven hiring decision. Your task is to analyze the provided interview notes for 5 candidates who interviewed for this role. Your evaluation must be based only on the information in the notes. So see, again, this particular sentence here is further telling AI not to hallucinate, not to make its own assumptions and whatnot. So we are trying to tighten the sandbox in which we want it to play. Then we're telling it first review the key competencies for the role, which we had extracted earlier, and now perform the following actions: create the summary scorecard, provide a ranked shortlist, write a detailed rationale for your top three, why you chose top three, and give me a final recommendation from your perspective. And also explain to me why you chose them as your top list,
Wow.
right?
This
And
is
write.
amazing. This is the kind of thing, honestly, that would take you so many days trying to go sort out and make sure that everybody was following this particular methodology. This is great. Then
Yep.
to see what happens.
And then right in the end, what I do is I add the notes that I had taken. See, we don't even have to worry about formatting here. Right. So I'll just show you first candidate's raw notes. So here's the candidate name. And here are the notes that the hiring manager took while they were interviewing the candidate against the competencies that we were evaluating them for. So I just put in all the notes for all 5 candidates in one go. And now we are asking it to begin your evaluation. Let's see the output that we get from here.
Nice to see this. Look at this summary scorecard. Nice little table. Wow. Key strengths, potential risks, weaknesses, overall fit assessment. So this is a critical thing, right? This is all about how you gather data and the quality of your data, because then you get a nice, lovely, neat output like this. And you start to think, my God, this is amazing. This, what you just showed me, is the most efficient recruitment process I've ever seen. And I've been doing this for 35 years. It's ridiculous, you know?
And imagine how liberating it is for the hiring manager that they don't have to worry about, oh, I have to collect this data and make sense of it later. Sense making can be delegated to AI, whereas the hiring manager can engage meaningfully in the conversation to tease out and unpack the details that they want AI to evaluate later on. And
Well, that,
there's nowhere in this process human is out of the loop. At every touch point, the hiring manager is evaluating whether the output of this AI processing is matching their expectations, right from the job description to analyzing the inputs that we've given it to evaluate.
super important for you to mention that, because that is one of the things that we always ever have to remind people who are going through or learning about AI in terms of the work context, which is they're probability engines, and they basically tokenize letters and words and phrases and things of that nature to kind of ultimately predict what typically would most probably follow another token. And how does that all work? Now, having said that, they're powerful probability machines. I mean, these things use vector analysis, which is just mind-numbingly detailed. And frankly, you don't need to know about that other than they put together thoughts, concepts, and ideas across piles of complex information and make sense of it. That's kind of what they do. Do they always ever do it perfectly? No, they don't. But having said that, this is when human judgment and critical thinking and evaluation come into play over and over and over again. So that is always ever got to be the way that you kind of look at this, which is it's an augmentation of your already capable self and experienced self. But wow, what an augmentation. I mean, to your point, we're suddenly getting all these incredible, we got a ranked list of the candidates.
Yeah.
Based on a detailed, summary of each one of them across 3 or 4 different dynamics. And then ultimately it then said, right, on top of everything else, let's go for a final recommendation. It says, well, this is the right person. That might generate some interesting debate and questions like, oh, really? That's interesting. How come? Well, the rationale is right here. It's not, that's interesting. I didn't quite get that, but did you guys experience it? Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's not great. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Now we are having, as human beings, the kinds of intellectual debates and discussions and, you know what I mean? And kind of cogitations, if you will, that we're getting paid to have, as opposed to, oh, God, Sally didn't interview him because she was sick that day. Bob basically went on holiday in the middle of the interview process. We're missing that data. I really like this Aurora. She was hysterical. Oh my God, the jokes she told were just amazing.
Yeah.
It just removes all the noise and just gets you right down to brass tacks. If I had this growing up through my career, I would have been a bloody genius. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's time for other people to, and us as well, to augment ourselves and play like geniuses. And I think people who have had lived experiences like yourself and many people in the HR domain, if we leverage AI as a co pilot, imagine how much it can augment our capabilities, because it'll always go from the starting point that we give it. It's our imagination that gives it the starting point to take it to the next level. And this is where our lived experiences are going to really shape the future of how we augment ourselves.
Exactly right. So interesting. So where do you think this all goes next? I mean, so you've just walked us through a process just to maintain perspective, which basically was from beginning to end, i.e., put the job description together, set up all the interview questions, and frame up, that process. We then presumably go through all the interviews, and people are smart enough to kind of like either put good notes together or use tools like otter.ai and these other, Firefly and a couple of other tools that digitize and transcript your conversation and then feed that into, this process of evaluation. Create an evaluation format and matrix against which you can basically, as objectively as you possibly can, put everybody's notes together, compare and contrast, and then basically build a short list,
Mhm.
a stack rank list in terms of basically who did better top to bottom, and then put a final recommendation together, again, backed up by data.
Yeah.
This has taken us less than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That's shocking. This is the kind of stuff that would absolutely bury us in administrivia, in internal debates, in arguments about how best to go do this,
Yeah.
or just complete apathy, and people would just walk away from it.
Yeah.
So I guess the question begs, cool. So where do we go from here then?
Yeah. And to your point, Jeff, we are also seeing that new tools and technologies are emerging too. I mean, yes, right now the friction point is that we have, as hiring managers, have to spend time making sure that the right data is captured for evaluation. But I'm sure there would be a lot of existing tools and new tools that would be coming up that make that process of data collection very easy and seamless, so that what we have to kludge together now, hunting, gathering, and putting it together in a chat GPT, there would be tools that would be doing this for us, the tools that can now record, transcribe, and automatically generate structured summaries of interview conversations that are aligned to those job competencies. And there's research that says that interviewers are saving around 3 to 5 hours a week on administrative work because of the tools that are at their fingertips now. And who knows, we might soon live that science fiction world of an AI life coach with the hiring manager, and make life easy for the hiring managers too. An AI coach for the interviewer, I think in the future would become a necessary tool to level the playing field. It could help the interview probe beyond the polished AI generated answers to test for genuine understanding. Because just like hiring managers are using AI to augment themselves, the interviewees would also be using AI to prepare and plan for those interviews. So this engagement between the interviewer and interviewee is going to only augment using AI and AI tools in the future.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. Just even today, just flipping through doom scrolling on my phone, as I occasionally do, just to engage with some mild entertainment. But inevitably, I am buried by all sorts of AI updates, AI products, AI, changes, this, that, and the
Yeah.
other. And one popped up today that I've been hearing about called Cluely, like Clue LY.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what is that? Cluely. I've been hearing about it all over the place. And it's like this invisible bot that lives on your machine and basically can help you do all sorts of things. It can take notes on any conversation you're having. It can give you prompts. It can give you answers to people's questions as they're coming through on like a Zoom call, like we're doing right now in a webinar, whatever the case. Also, as you're being interviewed, basically, right? You'll get a question handed to you and it's like automatically generating, very viable answers back. I was like, this is getting crazy, man. It's getting out of hand.
Yeah. And recruitment is that one area of HR that has been, was the first focal point for AI product or product companies to focus on how they can augment using AI. So there's a lot of new tools and technologies and a lot of work happening in the recruitment process to augment it and make it better. But at the same time, the equation is not fully solved. Like recruiters are still inundated by resumes. ATS is still not helping solve for the problem. So the equation still has to be made better. But till the time we have those sophisticated tools that solve for the complete end-to-end recruitment experience. Every company has ChatGPT, Gemini, or some form of generative AI where we can be creative in exploring how can it solve for our needs today, given where we are at in our established recruitment process. So, with that, I have a question for you because you have such rich lived experiences in broadly in HR and also in recruitment. And many CHROs are already solving for integrating AI in recruitment. But there are leaders, HR leaders, who are still in early stages of investigating. Because to be honest with you, some are in wait and watch mode, especially with news like, Workday, the class action lawsuit on Workday for whatever bias issues that the software was presenting. So some leaders are in that wait and watch mode. So if you were a CHRO listening right now, what's one action that you would take tomorrow to bring this kind of structured interviewing into your organization and not get into wait and watch mode? Because that also is a dangerous stance.
It is indeed. And look, a couple of things come into this, right? Job one is look, get with your IT teams, get with your legal teams, get with your compliance teams, and start talking with them. Start an open conversation that says, we need to pull together an AI usage policy. And we need to understand what the legal ramifications are. We need to understand what the guardrails are and all those kinds of things. Get that process rolling. It will take a long time. There are brilliant examples all over out there to choose from and to use. Either coming from very well-established, corporations like Unilever. I just thinking Schneider Electric was another one. Obviously, from the big tech firms, they've got lots of good information as well. So there is that process. The other process is get started and start having some fun on a pilot level, right? Pick a willing group of individuals and say, hey, I'd like to basically run an experiment similar to the one we just went through in terms of the recruitment process. God knows that process is always ever churning and always ever rolling. So get some agreement with some hiring managers to say, I'd like to do this, and I'd like to basically use AI outside of the use of our ATS solution. And let's just see how quickly this goes. Let's see what we learn from each other in terms of this process. Let's see if we can't do it smarter, faster, cheaper, and see how that ultimately rolls. You don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to, kind of do this on a company-wide basis. So just use AI to help you structure your thinking and to help you basically articulate and then illustrate what it is you're basically trying to do. Um, and then measure everything. Go from try to baseline like before you actually start the AI process. How long did it take you to, attract the right candidates? How long did it take to get those candidates interviewed? How quickly, importantly, did the selection debate process take? And what was your then time to hire? Right? I mean, those are the kinds of things you want to kind of measure. And if you can kind of show a use case where your time to hire drops from 60 to 90 days, all the way down to maybe 30, maybe 25 days, because you're using an enhanced process like this, that's amazing. That's a huge time and money saver. So that would be, where I would start. Be bold, be brave. This is easier than you think. This is exciting. All you're doing, you're programming computers using natural language. That's what's so fun about this. Follow the simple formulas that Shweta and I talk about in terms of building the context, sharing the ask, talking about, how it is you'd like it delivered to you. Show some examples if it's a complex thing. All right. And then basically, kind of just wait for it to kind of roll on. And then you just iteratively chase it and chase it if you need to and get better and better answers. But yeah, it's at your fingertips. These things are amazing and can really change your life and save you loads of time, effort, and money.
Yeah, that is a great place for us to pause our conversation today, Jeff. And I will wrap us up by saying that AI isn't just about saving HR time. Structured interviewing reduces legal risks, to your point, improves hiring quality, and also helps avoid the massive costs of a bad hire. And if this episode sparked ideas, or if you want to try the GPT prompts or tools we talked about and used today, check out the show notes for links and resources. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share this with your hiring teams. So until next time, keep going beyond HR.